Never quite turns out the way I thought it would, because I was hoping to get through 2 today, because I tend to bog down. You all know that. But that's okay. We'll get as far as we can. So we are on Law 4. I was thinking about getting to Law of Motivation. I don't know that it's going to take a whole lot of time. It says 8 things there, but I was going to read them real quick. But we are right here. The law of respect. Now, how many of you want to be respected? If you don't raise your hands, you're just lying to me. Because everybody wants to be respected, right? Everybody wants people to not treat them poorly. Everybody wants other people to accept their boundaries, right? One of our problems, as he says here, I'll read through this for just a second. He says, the word comes up again and again, but people describe their problems with boundaries as how they describe them is they, right? With our boundaries. They don't do this. They don't do that. They don't respect this. They don't respect that. How many of you have set a boundary? You don't have to raise your hand to this one, but how many of you set a boundary and the first thing to your mind is, well, they're never going to respect it anyway. They're never going to follow it. They're not going to do it. They don't have no respect for me in the first part, right? In the first place, right? Have we ever said that? Have you ever thought that? Have you yelled it at somebody? Well, you're not going to do it anyway, so why even set the boundary?
I said that to my dogs this morning.
No.
Right. He said it to his dog.
Did they respect you?
No.
One of his dogs ate my kid's shoe, so I don't know what to tell you. It's an entertaining thing. His dogs are hilarious, and they got that one. I just never did. It always looks like it wants to eat me. Whenever I'm over there, it's like, you ever come face to face with a police dog, canine unit?
What kind of life are you living, David?
No. Now, this was a good face-to-face, right? Where they had the dog with them. They pulled the dog out and showed me this dog. You can sit there and be quiet rest of the class, right? You are not respecting my boundaries. Anyway, but this dog, man, was salivating looking at me. And I'm like, why is that dog salivating looking at me? She says, that dog wants to eat you. But it will not eat you unless I tell it can eat you. And I'm like, do not say whatever it is you got to say. Because that dog looked like it was ready to... Anyway, it would not have respected my personal space.
You recognize criminals very fast.
That's a good one, Bubba.
That's both of you silent for the rest of the class. Right? But how many of us have ever felt that way, right? That even if we set a boundary, nobody's going to respect it. Right? Nobody's going to respect that boundary. Nobody's going to... That's a process that we feel. But they won't accept me if I say no. But they will get angry if I set limits. Right? How many of you, don't raise your hand, these are rhetorical questions. How many of you have ever had a family member that you wanted to set boundaries with, but were afraid of how they would respond to you? Well, they're just going to cut me out. They're going to throw me off. They're not going to engage with me. Or they're going to be mad at me. They're going to be upset with me. I can't handle people being upset with me. The pleaser in people hates when somebody's upset, so they don't set boundaries with people because they don't want people to be upset with them. Right? If I set a boundary, they're gonna this, that, or whatever. You know how many people I talk to are afraid to set boundaries because they don't want to lose that person or persons in their life? Right? We are afraid of that, but they will get angry if I set limits, but they won't speak to me for a week if I tell them how I feel. We fear that others will not respect our boundaries. Now, I don't know if somebody not talking to you for a week is the worst thing in the world. Especially if you're having to set a boundary with them. Right? What's one of the first things we said about boundaries, and we've really been saying it since the beginning of the class years ago at this point, was that when you set a boundary, the first thing people are going to do is what?
Challenge that boundary.
Challenge the boundary. Kick against that boundary. They're going to find a way to get past it. When you give your kid a boundary of what they can or cannot do, first thing they want to do is what? Do they not test it? Right? It's sort of like a wrestling ring. They're slinging themselves against the rubber band sides of that wrestling ring, seeing if there's a weak spot. Anybody remember the first Jurassic Park movie? And they had the raptors in that really high intensity cage. And they said the female had all the other raptors testing the fences in different areas looking for what? The weaknesses. Is there a weak spot in the defense? Is there a weak spot in the fencing? Is there a way that I can get through it? How many of you have had cattle? What will a cow eventually find? Right? And then one gets through. They're all just moving on down the path, aren't they? Well, I had one person that says, it doesn't matter if the hole is that big in the fence. That cow, which is 9,000 pounds, is going to find a way to get through that hole, right? And so that's what people do. Boundaries, they're constantly testing them. They're constantly finding a way to get through it. I don't know if somebody's saying, well, I'm just not going to talk to you anymore if you set that boundary. Okay. That may be why I said it. Maybe I need separation from you. Maybe I don't need that kind of engagement from you, right? It's difficult, right? We fear that others will not respect our boundaries. We focus on others and lose clarity about who? Ourselves. Sometimes the problem is that we judge others' boundaries. We judge the boundary decisions of others, thinking that we know how best they ought to give, and usually that means they ought to give me what I want, the way I what? I want it. Right? I want them to do this way. All right? Adult children of parents. You ever get frustrated with your parents because they want you to do things a certain way and it's their way or the what? Highway. Anybody ever, don't raise your hand, rhetorical. Anybody ever experience that? Anybody experience that with your children to where they are that way? It has to be their way or the highway. Nobody's respecting anybody's boundaries at that point, right? Is that not the case? Right? But the Bible says whenever we judge, we will be judged. When we judge others' boundaries, ours will fall under the same judgment. If we condemn others' boundaries, we'll expect them to what? We'll go to it. Condemn ours. This sets up a fear cycle that makes us afraid to set boundaries that we need to set. As a result, we comply, then we resent, and that love we have given becomes sour. You ever given into a boundary and then had that taste in your mouth? And then sort of like Haggard, yep, shouldn't have done that. No, shouldn't. Who got the Haggard reference? Right. Harry Potter. Anyway, all right. I told you, no more talking today. It is, maybe I shouldn't have done that because it leaves this bad taste in your mouth, right? Right? This is where the law of respect comes in. As Jesus said, in everything we do to others what you would have them do to you. We need to respect the boundaries of others. We need to love the boundaries of others in order to command respect for our own. We need to treat their boundaries the way we want them to treat ours. So how would that look like in your life? Do unto others as you would have them do unto you. Right? What's that called? Golden rule. How many of you got rulers in Sunday school when you were little? Now I'm old, so that may be something they don't do anymore. Anybody remember that?
We did.
Yeah. Here, my churches, do you remember getting those? You never got the rulers? Oh!
Gold stars.
Gold stars. I used to have a golden ruler on the wall of my bedroom that said, do unto others as you would have them do unto you. The golden rule. Right? Very corny. But you know, I got the point across. Right? It's how you measure things, isn't it? Right? Are you measuring the way they're engaging with you? Are they measuring the way they treat you? Right? So what would that look like in your life? Say that again for me.
Where you have balance.
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you. You're not supposed to be talking. No, I'm joking. There's supposed to be balance. No, that's not a lot of the things in this life, right? So you said, there's balance? Is that right?
Yeah, I mean, I guess it would be balance, wouldn't it? Like if
more balanced?
And if you were reciprocating the relationship that someone was giving you and it was a balanced
What happens if you have to be the one to start that?
I don't have a problem with that.
I'm going to respect your boundaries.
Yeah. You model that to them. And
absolutely.
You're hoping model, mirror, however that makes sense to you.
Right.
You mirror that behavior.
Well, if you're mirroring their behavior, you're going to be doing what they're doing to you.
Right, but I'm just saying, like, if you
want them to mirror your behavior, right?
Exactly, yeah.
So we want to model that for them. I think that's kind of where my brain was going with some of this is we want to model that behavior for other people. We want to model that for them. No, listen, don't take this as with your little 4, 5, 6-year-old, you need to accept their no when they don't want to go to bed. This is not what we're talking about. We are really talking about adolescent to some point and adult interactions with the children, right? It is, what good does it do us to drive that child? So we've had 2 very painful conversations today in our prayer requests about children who are errant. right? We want, as parents, to do what to that child? Grab them by the ear, drag them back to church, right? You go to church, right? But does that do it? Daniel, does that help?
Well, I've tried it. No.
How many of you ever tried to force somebody? Now we're talking about adultish people here. We're not talking about little kids because they just need to be drugged whether they like it or not, right? That's how you teach them when they are young. Anyway.
Both ears.
Has anybody ever had luck forcing somebody to do something?
Depends on what you do.
Okay. Can you give me an example? Well, you work in the court system. They
makes
force
you
you to do
feel
all
good, yeah.
right. Well,
They're
that's
conforming.
interesting, right? It makes you feel how. But what's it do for them? Nothing. Remember the conversation I had about that one time when Aaron was 14 or 15 years old and I told him he had to apologize to his brother and he said, well, I'll apologize, but you can't make me mean it. Well, I can make you do something, maybe, but I can't make you what? Mean it, respect it, internalize it, truly believe it. So we might be able to make a child go to church, but what do we not do? Make them believe it. Make them accept it. Make them, right? Sometimes children lack the boundaries that they need to stand up against onslaughts of things in the world, right? So what do? We have to respect that with them.
I think there's a difference with, so, you know, like you're saying, like, yes, when they're small, like, you do drive them to church, but you're doing it just by setting an example.
Mhm.
Like, you know, like, you know, everybody gets in the car, like, you go. Like, it's, you know, that's just what's done. But there's a big difference in making kids conform and being transformed.
Mhm.
And I think that as parents, we can get very focused on making sure they're conforming to what we want, rather than our goal actually being they're transformed by the word
Mhm.
of God. So, I just think there's a big difference. And we're thinking as long as they're being obedient, they're being conformed. No, because like there's a whole internal thing going on.
Well, a big chunk of some religion, I think arguably some of the Church of Christ from a long time ago, is as long as you look like you're doing it,
Yeah, but
you're perfectly fine. As long as you put on what I use the concept, I'm sure I've said this in my counseling, of the church face. I tell people when they come to counseling, I don't need to see your church face. I don't need to see this false, whitewashed image of who you are. I really need to see you. I need to understand who you are. I need to know that person below the surface of who they are. Now, we can do really good to look apart, right? There's a concept I use in therapy called Facebook perfect, right? Because I have lots of mothers that come in and feel like they're failures because all their little friends out there on Facebook's homes look perfect, or their children look perfect, or they're all like shining in their pictures. And what they don't realize is there's only 4 feet of cleanliness in that room. And it took an hour and a half of screaming at those children to get them to stand for the picture. But none of that is where? On the Facebook, right? None of that is where everybody else can see it, right? And so people get really frustrated, right? That they can create this false image so they can, use your phrases again.
Conform versus transform.
We can conform all day long. That becomes a sermon. But what's it take to transform somebody? What is the number one way we can get somebody to believe something? Say again? Example. I model the behavior. I do the behavior. I am the behavior. I show you the behavior. My actions will speak so much louder than my words. How many of you believe that? Not a rhetorical question. Right? How many of us believe that? That doesn't mean every single time we model behavior, somebody's going to be like, oh, can I be like you? But what are we doing? We are helping possibly to transform. Which is, because I'm reading a book right now, something that came across transform and conformity, and it's very interesting how much more. Well, our kids learn to conform to faith. Well, I'll go so I don't have to deal with my parents, and I'll show up but as soon as I turn 18 and I'm out of the house, guess what? I've never stepped foot in church. Anybody ever heard that? Don't raise your hand. You ever heard that? You know how many parents I've had in my room? When they turned 18 and went off to college, they never stepped foot in a church again.
Along with that, though, you got to live what you believe.
Yes.
Or they see right through it.
Mm-hmm.
Right. That's what
Yeah.
I was gonna say, the modeling is, they've seen you live it, not just say it.
Not just
Mhm.
at church and on Sunday, dragging them to church, but it's actually what happens Monday through Saturday.
When no one's looking.
Yeah.
Because, oh, by the way, somebody's always looking.
Well, when none of us are looking,
Yeah.
because we see each other 3 times a week.
Yeah.
So,
We can be good that long.
What did Taylor Swift say? I can make a bad guy good for the weekend?
Seriously. Taylor Swift.
Taylor Swift. I am versed in the culture of the times. My daughter called me a Swiftie. What is a Swiftie? I am not a Swiftie. I'm just, I pick up phrases, right? And so,
where's that police dog?
There are boundaries.
argumentatively, that's the truth, though, right? We can look really good for, oh, Toby Keith. I'm as good as I once was, but I'm not quite good as Howard that
Now
goes.
we're talking.
Right?
But this is the thing too, I think you raise a child up in the way they should go, right?
Mm-hmm.
There comes a point where that child also has to take responsibility for what
Right.
they've learned, and they have to accept what they know to be true, and they have to walk in their own faith.
What is one of the things as parents we sometimes struggle with? Now, this is going to be way out of left field, but one of the things as parents we struggle with in teaching our children.
Let them fail.
And let
I
them
mean,
think
you
for
got to learn.
themselves.
That sometimes the only way you learn
And
is.
When to say
We're going to
no.
stick to that. Hold on just a second. All right, so let them fail.
You learn through.
How do they best learn? How do you best learn anything? Is by repetition, doing it again and again. We tell them when you fall off the horse, get back on the horse. So we learn through repetition of failure. That's just what it is. What did you say?
Well, let them think for themselves. Like, I think we really want our kids to think and believe just like us, but that's not their belief in their faith. Like, they have to find that on their own, and me trying to, like, put them in a box and you have to believe like I am. And who taught you to think? I've heard, like, a parent say that. Well, actually, I
My
have.
dad.
Okay.
Y'all, so y'all don't know his dad. It's the
But,
person.
I mean, that was the thing. Like, Jeremy's brother questioned a lot about the Bible, and his dad couldn't answer those questions, which is okay.
Mhm.
But that frustrated him, so he was like, who taught you to think? Well, so Jason actually is what, atheist now? Anyway,
He does.
because you've got to, he was an academic person. He had to think, and he had to explore, and he had to question, and when that was stifled, what was really stifled was his faith, and it's gone,
So that's where I was going. The thing out of left field is we as parents, as a general concept, do we want our children to think on their own? Now we're going to say, oh yeah, I want to. You're a liar if you say yes. Because we want them to just follow the rules. We want them to not cause havoc at home. We don't want to have to deal with it. We just want it to be okay. Right? Bill Cosby used to say, I don't care who's causing the problem. I just want the sound to stop. Right? Is that not the case? I don't care who's doing what. I'm smacking somebody. Because I want the sound to stop. Isn't that true? Right? Stop making that noise. He's doing it. You're bigger and understand more. I don't care. Right? It's just the way it is. But we don't necessarily teach our children the concept of a thing called free will. You have the power to make your choice. God did not make you a robot to follow a program. He gave us the freedom to make a decision. He gave us the freedom to choose whether we will or will not follow. Our job as the parents were to teach them what it means to understand the concept of free will. Are we teaching them that in our Bible classes? Are we teaching that in our schools? Are we teaching that at home? Are we teaching them to think for themselves and make their faith their own? The Sticky Faith book, remember when we did Sticky Faith here? Anybody read that book when we did that class? Right? The whole concept of that book is making that faith their faith. Because if it's your mama's faith, and I think COVID has proved this out just a little bit, is that quite a few people who came because grandma came and because they were used to coming, because all of a sudden what? They quit coming. And when they opened the doors back up, guess what? They didn't come no more. We went from 325 people to just over 200, and we're barely up to 225 to 250. Because a vast majority of people, that was not their faith. It was somebody else's faith, and they just didn't have the guts to say, I'm not coming. Now all of a sudden, we gave them permission not to come. They just didn't come back. Are we teaching them free will? Are we teaching them that they have to make this faith their faith?
Sometimes to do that, that's a journey.
Say again.
I said sometimes to do that, that's a journey.
Yes.
That's what hard part.
But that's, I think, one of the best examples, and I've seen this in families, is teaching your kid to drive. It's the hardest thing in the world to sit over on the right-hand side for hours. As soon as they got the permit at 15,
Sorry, brother.
Well, they drove as much as every time we got a car, they drove. Mainly because I wanted to be there to teach them, or at least to teach them some respect and some understanding. I have, and this is some situation I have now with even my grandkids. They never have had a chance to drive. They're graduating high school now, and on long trips, they haven't driven. And it's hard to let your kid try to drive through Chattanooga or through these places. And you're sitting there slamming the brakes on.
Holding on to the
But
bar.
the same thing's happening in life. We're waiting until they graduate high school. Then we're sending them off to a college.
Oh, hey, remember, your faith is yours.
And we're sending to a college where the teacher has no idea what a God is.
But you know what, teaching to drive is a really great example of what it is to teach somebody their own. Because I can tell them to do this, do that, and whatever. But what do they learn from? How'd you learn to drive? Huh? And by watching who? You didn't listen to anything I said about driving, but you watched the way I drive. Guess who he drives like?
Or running a stop sign because I said go up, go through, and straight ahead, and they didn't understand you must stop.
You overpowered me.
So then he got a lecture of I can't tell you
But
to
I
run a
would-
stop sign.
I will tell you, when I first started driving, we were driving, and I was riding in the back seat, and my mother was driving, and she had been on me about stopping at the stop sign. In Indiana, the stop signs are like 900 feet back from the road crossing. So she said, you're supposed to stop behind that sign. So we pulled up to 300 and Mount Comfort Road. She drives right past the sign, drives up to the edge of the road. And I said, hey, Mom, aren't we supposed to stop behind the sign? Guess who didn't drive for a while? This guy. But she said, touche, you got me, one for you. And then I didn't drive for a while. You know where they learn to drive? We can tell them all day long what they should not do. But what are they going to learn from? Our what? Our example. Are we teaching our children through our example what it means to have free will and what our faith is? Right? Are we respecting their boundaries in it? Worst thing we can do is force them in some forms, especially once they become an adult. But we want to lead, we want to guide, we want to show, we want to example that for them. I think that's off topic, but that's all right. Our real concern with others should not be, are they doing what I would do or what I want them to do? But are they really making and here it comes down to it, free choice? When we accept others' freedom, we don't get angry or feel guilty or withdraw our love when they set boundaries with us. We accept others' freedom. We feel better about our own. We example that to other people. Now, it doesn't mean we don't call people out. That doesn't mean we don't hold people accountable. That doesn't mean we don't discipline if discipline needs to occur. But that means we do everything we can to appreciate and respect the thing that God gave them. Who are we to steal what God gave them? All right. Thank you all very much. We made it through one. That's okay. We'll do number 5 on the law of motivation. Y'all have a wonderful day. Behave yourselves.
So are you